Welcome, everybody. It's the Electronic Attic. We're in the attic, and we're talking about electronic music and video. And today we have Donald Craig, Dr. Don, who's a master in handling specifically, I guess, computer animation, computer graphics, things that go along with music. A member of a group called Niemela and Craig. And I hear Niemela's a real pain to work with, so I don't know how you deal with him. But anyway, we were just going to go over some topics. Don had lent me a small library of DVDs to go look at about the history of video. So, Don, just wondering, what perhaps might be some of your favorite software? And I know you're working specifically in computer stuff these days, but favorite software that you like to work in?
For doing real-time video and graphics, generally prefer to use open frameworks, which is a framework for doing this kind of work. It gives you a lot of infrastructure so you don't have to you're not having to build everything yourself from scratch. And it's an open source project, so there's always people adding things to it and adding functionality.
But I wonder also, are there any favorite techniques in within this software that you're using, the graphic techniques maybe that you like to gravitate towards?
Sure. One of my favorite things to do is you have a way of you have an object called a frame buffer. It's kind of like an empty image or a canvas, and I'll have two of those, so I can draw things onto what I think of as the back, And then, after doing that for each frame in the real-time stream, you then copy that onto the front canvas, and then you can continue to draw things on the front canvas. So that means you can paint stuff in the background that doesn't go anywhere. So you can build up a really rich background thing and still draw details on top of. And that's a common thing that I've found very useful to do.
Yeah. And control in real time. Very nice, too. The fact that you're drawing on the moment at the spot. So
sure.
Very.
For that, it winds up mostly being MIDI controllers. I mean, that being a really practical thing to do, and MIDI's everywhere and attached to everything.
It is.
The other option would be something like Open Sound Control, OSC. Which can also be done, but I don't have any hardware that spits it out. I mean, but there's all sorts of MIDI hardware out there. Yeah.
Very nice. And on thinking about, I guess, contemporary stuff, any specific heroes of yours, or people that are doing stuff at the time that you're, as you're creating stuff, other people other than yourself being a hero of yourself?
Yeah, very recent. I mean, if we're thinking in terms of very recent, it's kind of hard to say. I mean,
I know.
Either because we just don't know who they are, or because so much of the recent stuff isn't all that particularly fascinating. But if you go back in terms of people in general, most of my heroes are much farther back.
Okay.
I mean, a good 100 years. I mean, Oscar Fischinger. I mean, he started doing stuff 100 years ago.
Actually, that's funny that you say that. It is actually 100 years ago. It's interesting to think about that. But yeah, I was going to say it is raining outside at the moment. So we'll just keep going on, but it's kind of an interesting background, possibly hailing. But I know that Don had lent me a DVD collection, which was very nice. Learned quite a bit about what was going on. And so I guess what we'll do is we'll go over some of these DVDs, and we'll keep talking over the rain outside that's happening, either rain or hail. So anyway, Oscar Fischinger being, I guess, one of the early guys there, and just fascinated with, the 20s, I guess, when he started doing stuff. So,
yeah, he was doing kind of old school animation where he'd draw a frame and then photograph it, and then draw the next frame and photograph that. And my favorites of his tend to be the black and white studies, which were, charcoal on white paper, which he then inverted in the camera, so it was white things on black background.
Sure.
And those were all synchronized with audio.
Okay.
So he would take a recording of some usually classical piece of music and
Mm-hmm.
just and you know get the timings. You know, he would.
Mm-hmm.
These were all on long play records. And he would actually take chalk and mark the timings on that, so he
Wow.
could figure out.
Okay.
So he could figure out
Early.
exactly what the timings were for how many frames he needed to get
Early
from here to,
SMPTE timing for the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed. Yeah, to see that stuff. And his spirals. I guess that you always think about. The guy falling into the void, and the early. I guess it might have been Hitchcock or some of those where he's falling into the void of Netherland, and the graphic in the background, realizing that was a big deal. I guess when that came out at that time. So, okay. Moving on. Somebody else, I guess, would be early. Would be actually we'll talk about somebody who started out early in that time, which would be Stan Brakhage, and it seems like a long span of time that he covered, but I gotta say I like his later stuff, possibly the '80s stuff where it was kind of direct painting on film. But I know he started with working with film style stuff, abstract early. I don't know how.
Oh, you mean
Dog Star Man,
Yep.
About that era. I think that was like 1961. But anyway, Brakhage.
Like I say, I agree. I prefer the later stuff where he was doing the direct on film stuff, where he would take a film strip and actually literally paint on it, and then rephotograph that. But it was another way of doing the animation, where you're actually creating each frame by frame.
Right.
Of course, when he was printing it later, he might photograph the same frame multiple times, right? So you'd get, 2 frames of the same thing and then 3 frames.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of thing. So
noticed,
he developed a kind of a rhythmic thing doing that.
Yeah, I like the fast pacing of that very much too. For me, just for being saturated with your memory frame to frame and all the frames being different. Really interesting experience for that. But yeah, great stuff. I love watching that collection from the time span and the long time span and all the stuff he's done, and good stuff. How about another gentleman, Jordan Belson? And I got to say, I really liked his early stuff very much as well. For me, it struck me as being the presence of abstract music with the abstract image, going, and it would seem to be from, I guess, in the collection I saw, the first time I was seeing what we're, seeing a lot of today, where there wasn't any more coordination going on, and you're taking in both in your head. I don't know, maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but I found that to be really interesting in the Belson. I don't know if that was...
Yep. Yeah, because he was doing some of the music he was doing was actually electronic.
Right.
Yeah.
Loved it very much.
Brakhage did some of that too. I mean, some of the music on some of his stuff was done by James Tenney,
who
was a well-known computer / electronic guy.
Sure. Okay.
I have to say, the early stuff of Belson's is great. I actually like some of the later stuff quite a bit more. I mean, the with the slow-moving atmospheres.
Okay.
Which is, and that's kind of what he's kind of started to specialize in that kind of thing. That's what he really, his later stuff is where he just decided to do that. And he actually did some of that for special effects in Hollywood films. If you know The Right Stuff.
Right.
Where the pilot's in the cockpit and he's looking out at the sky or whatever, and some of the really atmospheric stuff, that was Jordan Belson using his same techniques.
Wow.
So
Yeah, nice. Okay. Well, that brings up another name here as we move on into the 60s, and that would be John Whitney. And really amazed to read the history of him having started with these World War II gun sights as a tool for his graphics, and ending up doing computer stuff. I mean, there's a guy that really traveled the technical spectrum.
Well, yeah, but you think in terms of the gun turrets and some of the other stuff. I mean, that was the same kind of mechanical computation that they were doing in England during the World War.
Okay, right.
Where same kind of thing where it was computer, but it was all mechanical computers, right? But it was the same idea,
Right. Okay.
you know.
Gotcha.
So it all kind of, you know, it kind of flowed in a, you know.
Right. Sure.
But yes, I mean that's Whitney's great for the computer stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was impressed with the layers of action, you know, and like you said, I mean, looking at the computer screen and the hardware, pretty early stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at some of that stuff now, it's like, I mean, you might as well go back to the gun turrets. I mean, that's how primitive it looks, at least in terms of the technology he had on hand.
Yeah.
I would say in terms of my own thinking as an artist, you know, when you think about giving like an artist talk, you know, and you give that little elevator pitch about your major influences, the two of mine would be Oscar Fischinger for the look and the style, and Whitney for the computer part of it.
Wow. Right.
Yeah. So those are my two big names.
The big,
you know?
Yeah.
Lots of other people I like as well, you know, the Belson and all that, but those are the two, I mean, the primary influences.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the last person in the collection that you showed me, which was Dennis Miller. And I got to say, I mean, seeing that rung a bell right away, because I got introduced to this, you know, coming into graduate school. And the techniques that I saw on the Dennis Miller looked very familiar, and the sounds being very familiar as well. So enjoyed that very much, looking at that, and to think that you know, that was something that I got to see the beginning of, and now things have moved on, you know, and computing technology has changed so much. But what do you think of the Dennis Miller? You like?
I really like a lot of that. I think he's a really good example of, you know, and this is where I should maybe add him to my list of primary influences. But it's because he's doing both the computer animation and the sound.
Right.
So he's composing both the video portion and the music portion.
Right.
Using, you know, computer techniques primarily. But that, you know, is a you know, an essential feature of my own personal work, you know, doing both aspects of it.
Sure. Yeah. Software-wise, on the music side, using C-Sound, I believe.
That's right.
Still
it's a good question whether he still uses it, but that was certainly what he was using in those earlier pieces.
Actually.
2000,
which is what we all learned on at that time. Date us at that for that. But and, you know, I think, you know, C-Sound 5, I still use it, love it, do stuff in it. It's not the only piece of software that I use for, but and the fact is that he was doing both. I know what you mean, the workload. The fact is you're doing the visuals and turning around.
But it gives you the opportunity to actually like really coordinate, you know, both, or not coordinate if that's what you want to do. But the idea is it becomes you're not trying to make one fit the other, especially if one of them is from some other source, like you got some music from somebody else or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot to be said for that kind of unified thing.
Okay.
You know, doing both.
Yeah. Okay, and one last question, just to continue on the continuum. So Don, what's a favorite piece of yours, perhaps, that you one of your own that you think is? Any favorites, or you can't pick one out of the many children?
I'd have to think about it, but I mean
it's okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms. I mean, because you might think about adding some links to this video on a couple of the things that, because some of these things we've mentioned, you're not going to be able to find them on YouTube because copyright and whatever.
Right, gotcha.
But I've got a couple of things that are obviously homages to one or another of these people.
Okay.
And we could probably look at
yeah,
those.
We'll do a link to perhaps a website you have that maybe has a lot of this. Well, thank you very much. Donald Craig, video maestro, master, Dr. Don. So thanks for watching. This is the Electronic Attic, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Thank you.